Good afternoon. Welcome to Planning Committee B. We've received apologies from both the Chair and the Vice Chair this evening, so we need to take a vote and elect a new Chair. So do we have nominations for a Chair, please? Councillor Daubney.
Thank you. Can I nominate Councillor Fisher, please?
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Orrell. So can I have a show of hands for Councillor Fisher, please? Thank you, Councillor Fisher, if you'd like to join us.
Whilst Councillor Looker is getting settled in, we have also apologies from the Vice Chair, and since it's possible that some matters may be delegated to Chair and Vice Chair, I think it is necessary to appoint a Vice Chair, and I'm prepared to nominate Councillor Crawshaw as Vice Chair. Do you have that seconded? Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. So if I disappear at any point, Councillor Crawshaw can take over. Okay, moving on to item 1 on the agenda, declaration. Oh, sorry, apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Hollier, who is not here, and apologies from Councillor Melly, and Councillor Looker is substituting for Councillor Melly, but there's no substitute for Councillor Hollier. Okay, all of the members are present. So if we now just ask if any members have any declarations of interest, please, on any items in the agenda. Councillor Craghill, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, in the interest of transparency, in regard to agenda items 4A and 4B, that as Executive Member for Housing, I have been aware of the broader issues that have been around recently on the issue of holiday lets and concerns from residents, and obviously being involved in that role in the consultation response that we made to government on this issue. That's always focused around the notion that holiday lets play a role in our local economy, but that they should be subject to planning scrutiny. So therefore, I think in the light of these two items, I am not predetermined on the specific items in front of me, so I don't think it's prejudicial, but I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Councillor Looker.
I won't repeat Councillor Craghill's statement, but I'm in the same position. I've had a lot of correspondence on this issue, but I haven't taken a free judgment.
Thank you. I too will declare an interest that I have taken some correspondence, but at no point have I declared any intention as to how I will vote. And I would also declare an interest in item 4F, the presence of a music venue. My son plays in a popular rock band in the area, although he's never played at the venue, and I think it's unlikely that his kind of music will go down well there, but just for transparency, I will mention that fact. Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I think probably quite a few of us have had similar correspondence with regards to 4A and B, and I haven't responded to that correspondence. I will need to say something around item 4F, but I will save it until we get there, if I may, and then it's pertinent before we start discussing that item.
Thank you. Okay, so when it comes to the plans, due to the availability of an officer and his need to travel, we're going to take item 4F after 4A and 4B. So we're short break to take a person who is speaking, get them into the meeting via Zoom. But otherwise, we can move on now to the minutes of the two meetings, the 19th of October and the 10th of November. I'll take them first in separately. The meeting on the 19th of October, are members happy with those minutes? If you're happy to move it, is that seconded? All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. And now the minutes of the 10th of November 2022. Are we happy with those, members? Are members all happy with that? But I think general assent, I don't think we need to go any further on that one. It seems people seem happy. Moving on now to public participation on general items. There are no registered speakers on the public participation in general, so we can move on to the plans list. Now, we have, obviously, the councillors are down the side of the table who will actually discern the application. We have a number of officers who will assist us in our deliberations. All I would ask is that they introduce themselves when they first speak. I should also have mentioned, a bit out of the habit of chairing meetings, I should have mentioned that we're not expecting any fire drills. So if the fire alarm goes off, out the door, down the stairs, and meet outside the Grand Hotel. And if I could just ask all people present in the meeting to turn off their mobile phones and put them onto silent. Thank you. Should have done that at the start, but forgot. Okay, we'll move on to item 4A, number 1 Ascot Mews, change of use from dwelling house to short-term holiday, letting holiday accommodation. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this application is a retrospective proposal at number 1 Ascot Mews, Emerald Street, for the use of the building as short-term holiday letting accommodation. No external changes are proposed to the site or the building. The applicant has stated that the property will sleep a maximum of 6 people. Number 1 Ascot Mews can be seen at the back of the courtyard here, and a separate application for number 2 Ascot Mews to the right hand side is also to be considered after this one. Ascot Mews is an L-shaped courtyard that contains 3 two-storey properties, all of which are in short-term letting use at the moment, and 2 of which are the subject of applications to be considered today. They have no rear gardens. 4 parking spaces will be provided, 2 for number 1 and 2 for number 2 Ascot Mews within the courtyard, and these are to be accommodated in a tandem manner. The properties can be seen here again from outside in the street, and again an aerial view here sort of gives the context of Ascot Mews number 1, 2 and 3 and its relationship with the neighbouring properties. Over the previous use of the building, proposals simply demonstrate the removal of one of the double beds which can be seen on the first floor. And there's nothing further to add to the report. And the proposals are recommended for refusal, subject to the identified recommended reason.
Thank you. In order to get all the further questions to officers and avoid repetition, I propose to take the public speakers now, if that's okay, so we can ask them questions, and then any comments arising can be directed to the officers at the end of the meeting, at the end of that session. So we have 2 public speakers on item 4A. Councillor Melly, who I believe is speaking via Zoom.
Hello, Chair. Yes, can you hear me?
That's great. Can you hear us okay as well?
Yes, I can. So I'll crack on, shall I?
Absolutely. You've got 3 minutes.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I've registered to speak on agenda items 4A and 4B, but my comments on both are the same. So instead of repeating myself, I'll speak once, and please take my comments into account when considering both items. These applications are for significant change of use from the current permitted C3 use class. The applied use is wholly commercial, not residential. The level of noise, especially at night, the highly transient nature of visitors, and the increased vehicular movements make this unacceptable development. The NPPF says that development should enhance the economic, social and environmental conditions of the area. These applications do none of these things. In fact, they undermine these planning objectives. Beyond the personal profit of the owner, there is no economic benefit to allowing yet another full house short-term holiday let in an area where there is already a high density of this sort of accommodation in the market. In fact, there are negative economic impacts of the cumulative effects that these holiday lets have on an area in the form of exacerbating housing pressures. There would be negative social impacts on the neighbourhood of allowing this change of use. It undermines the sense of community in the neighbourhood by taking homes out of residential use and into commercial, as well as the impacts of noise and antisocial behaviour from the groups using the property. It would mean the loss of dwellings in an area of the city where there are huge housing pressures. It's worth noting that the pedestrian access running north to Huntington Road that is mentioned in the report is a very long, very narrow, overgrown, unlit alleyway. It isn't easy to find unless you know about it, and it isn't widely used. So all of the access to the properties of these applications is along Emerald Street, including people returning to the accommodation at night with raised voices. This isn't a through road, so it's a quiet, safe street where noise travels. Allowing all three of the properties in Ascot Mews to be holiday lets would mean a significant increase in
I'm sorry,
sorry, Chair, my laptop froze for a minute. Sorry, is it all right if I just go back to where I think you lost me?
Yes, if you'd like to go back to where you lost it, that's fine.
Sorry about that. I was just saying that these applications aren't in keeping with the residential nature of the surroundings. Because these applications are retrospective, the committee has the benefit of knowing what the negative impacts of granting these applications will be, as is demonstrated by the many objections from residents. The adverse impacts of approving these applications would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. There are strong planning grounds for refusing both of these applications, which would be upheld at appeal, as case law has shown. So please go with the officer recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I was just about to give you 30 seconds warning, but you got it in plenty of time. Thank you. Our second, so any questions for Councillor Melly? Has the members got any questions? Nope. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution. We'll take that into account when we make our deliberations and decision. The second person speaking is Councillor Fiona Fitzpatrick, who is appearing in person. If you'd like to, I think you know the ropes. You've got 3 minutes and I'll try and give you a 30-second warning. This time I won't have to count it because somebody's kindly provided a timer. So,
okay, thank you, Chair.
Yes.
As ward councillor, I have called this in for similar reasons to what Councillor Melly has said. I've been concerned about this for quite a while, really, apart from the recent applications that have gone in. It's in an area, as we said, that's residential. It's very near a primary school for which I was governor until recently. Sometimes on a Friday afternoon, you can have huge parties turning up of same-sex groups up to 20 in a partying mode. It really isn't in keeping with the family nature of the street. As we've said, it's a relatively narrow cul-de-sac with alleyways going on to Huntington Road. The impact on the neighbours, it's not only in Emerald Street, it's Huntington Road, it's Grove Lane Terrace, it's the other streets directly behind as well. You'll be able to see it all on the maps. It's a quite compact area. Community cohesion has been drastically affected by this. And although there may have been HMO applications in the past, we know that they are controlled by regulation and can be dealt with. But this holiday lets are not. As we know, this is going to be brought up tomorrow anyway by our MP Rachel Maskell in her private members bill. It's the proliferation now of holiday lets really that I'm concerned about most. I have to say that you will have received, people have made reference to, I've received a lot more of the correspondence from particular residents who have been so concerned and so vigilant that they have gone with a fine-tooth comb into all the legal aspects. Sui generis, is that it? I don't know how to pronounce it, but I mean, I now understand what that means. I didn't know before. And that's the nub of it, really. I think that we haven't at the moment got any controls over that sort of type of dwelling. So really, the neighbours are grossly affected by all of this. It's having a negative effect on the whole neighbourhood. I have to say also that residents are reluctant to come here today to speak in some cases because they were just a little bit concerned there might be some recriminations. So that's why I am here as the ward councillor to speak for them. I'll say no more really, apart from maybe to say that I think a condition that has been suggested of possibly by the applicant of possibly 6 people in number 1, 6 in number 2, and them being operated separately. There is absolutely no way that could be enforced or regulated. They share a courtyard. I just don't see how that could ever really be guaranteed.
Thank you very much indeed. Do any members have any questions for Councillor Fitzpatrick? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for coming to speak to us this evening, Fiona. Just a quick one, which I think was alluded to already, because the report on this one and 4B, which is the neighbouring property, talks about not being able to sort of see one without the other in terms of the way that they might operate. And I did sort of, my only thought I'd had was, what would we do if we only had one of these applications coming forward and not the two together? But am I correct in understanding that the third side of the L is also an Airbnb as well? And is that all under the same ownership as far as you know, or is it, are they separate things? Or?
It's separate ownership, but the same type of intention there. It hasn't come forward yet because I think they're waiting to see the owner, what happens with these two. But the idea is they will all share the same courtyard, so it would be even more people sharing that front bit. When we say courtyard, I mean it's just that bit of land in front. There's nothing behind. And the house that's the nearest and most adjacent, I know you haven't asked me this, Councillor Crawshaw, but the house most adjacent has got their children's bedroom windows overlooking the courtyard. They have to be shut all the time. Children really in the street are restricted in what they can do these days and have to be kept indoors at certain times.
Thank you. Any further questions from members? In that case, I'll thank you for your contribution and we'll take your views into account when we come to make our decision. Okay, we've heard from the public participants. Are there any questions for officers, please? None whatsoever. In that case, we can move into debate. I'm quite happy at this point if any member would like to make a proposal, or obviously I would not take the vote immediately on it. I would allow a little bit of debate, but if anyone would like to make a proposal, I'm quite happy to accept it. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I think, to be honest, this is possibly one of the most straightforward applications that I've had, in the sense of, you know, you can clearly see what the impact of it already has been. And I can't see anything within the report that would give me any reason to go against the officer's recommendation of refusal. So I will be very happy to move refusal. And I would just add, you know, I think there's a really difficult balance, isn't there, between the economic benefits of people coming into the city. And I've certainly gone to other cities and used Airbnbs and done so with my family. And that's been a really useful and valuable thing. So I think, you know, we don't want to say that Airbnbs absolutely anywhere and everywhere should all be removed, but I think there's quite a significant difference between that and essentially party houses that then have a massive impact on the neighbourhood. And it does seem to me that this is quite a clear example of something which has been open to use by large groups of people. And I would like to think that we could accommodate large groups of people coming into the city, but not in residential areas like this. So I'd have no hesitation in going along with the officer recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Looker.
Yes, I'm delighted to see the officer's recommendation. I think this particular site is actually quite interesting because Guildhall, these terrace streets are full of these little infills where people have squeezed accommodation into quite peculiar spaces or adapted quite, and therefore they are very, in a sense, very on top of each other and often have very, very limited shared access. As you will see, it's quite a narrow coming in from Emerald Street. And certainly you cannot, as a stranger, I mean, I've used it, but by golly, you wouldn't, if a complete stranger, use the awful footpath that runs behind because it's not kept up. It's often filthy muddy and no lighting. So it is going to be Emerald Street that gets all the traffic and the impact. And I think it's a very inappropriate use of what could be a nice, delightful home for a couple of 2 or 3 families to enjoy the benefits, but as a Airbnb, a holiday let, I think it's inappropriate. So I'm very happy to support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Craghill.
Thank you. I won't repeat very much at all, but I do think the officer's concluding recommendation really sums it up, that this, in this instance, particularly this property, both independently and in association with number 2, Ascot Mews, is having a very negative impact on local residents and on the whole nature of that street. You know, as a quiet cul-de-sac, as it says, that it is really inappropriate. So I think, yeah, very happy to support the recommendation to refuse.
No other members want to speak? I would totally agree with the comments of Councillor Crawshaw. Airbnbs have their place, but this to me is an absolute concentration of Airbnbs, which would undoubtedly end up as party houses. I can't see any way that the condition that two separate groups would have to take 1 and 2 could ever be enforced. So I'd be very happy to support refusal as well. I think since nobody else wants to speak, I think we'll put this to the vote. We have proposer and second for refusal in line with the officer's recommendation. Could I ask all those in favour of refusal please to show now? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. So we move on now to item 4B, which is to Ascot Mews, the next door property.
Thank you, Chair. Again, number 2 Ascot Mews sits adjacent to number 1 and sits in a corner of Ascot Mews. Much the same proposal as the one you've just considered. 6-bed holiday let, parking for 2 cars with tandem. Not much really further to add to the report other than it's recommended for refusal, much the same reasons as the one you've just considered.
Thank you. We have again 2 speakers, Councillor Melly and Councillor Fitzpatrick. Councillor Melly has indicated that she doesn't want to repeat her comments. Councillor Fitzpatrick, do you wish to speak again, or do you want your comments from the previous one to stand? In that case, are there any questions from members towards officers? No. In that case, we'll move this one to debate as well. Councillor Orrell.
For all the reasons that were given for the first application and the officer recommendation, I'm happy to propose refusal along the lines that the officers have recommended.
Thank you. Is that seconded? I think Councillor Cragg will beat you by about a microsecond. So that's seconded. Does anyone wish to debate? Councillor Crawshaw again.
I think it's just important to note that obviously the first one, we had the second site. I think the fact that there is a third site that is also being used for short-term holiday let is important, because I think that we might have a slightly different situation if we had one that had been refused and another not. I think it's the concentration of them all that means that the second one warrants refusal as well.
Yeah. Right. Any other members want to speak? In that case, we have proposed by Councillor Orrell and seconded by Councillor Craghill for refusal in line with officer recommendations. Could I ask all those members in favour of refusal please to show? And that is again unanimous. A little bit earlier than I perhaps anticipated. We now have to take will 5 minutes be adequate? 10 minutes break just to get these public speakers in for the item 4F3 Toft Green. So if you would like to take a break, thank you very much. Sorry. Okay, welcome back. We got that changeover done quite quickly. So before we move on now, we're moving on to item 4F, the application at 3 Toft Green, York. Now, Councillor Crawshaw would like to explain something about his position.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a slightly unusual situation in that when this application first went in 2020, the application involved the loss of the music venue. And at the time, myself and Councillor Kilbane had been trying to ensure that local plan policy D3 was applied to any cultural venue of any sort, and particularly around live music venues. So I lodged an objection to the original application on the specific grounds of the loss of the music venue under local plan policy D3. Obviously, in the intervening 2 and a bit year period, the plans have changed quite substantially, and the music venue is retained within this application, and indeed the report makes clear that the music venue could continue to operate now. It's not material per se to this application. So I've double checked with legal and with the monitoring officer, both of whom are very happy that my original grounds for objection are not relevant or material to this application. I made no other comment or suggestion about any other aspect of the scheme, and so as such I'm approaching this in a very much open-minded way of the scheme that is now presented before us, which is materially different to the scheme that I objected to in 2020.
Thank you very much. I think that makes that very, very clear indeed. Okay, so if we can pass over to Gareth Arnold, our development officer, who will, or Eric, I think, are you going to take it? Whichever.
I'll just go through the slides, Chair. So this is a planning application for the demolition of the existing buildings at number 3 Toft Green, and the erection of a new building comprising a ground floor music venue with offices above, and there's an external landscape terrace to the rear above the ground floor level. So just to go through the presentation, so that's the existing site plan. The building on the frontage here was probably a Mews building connected with the grand house on the Micklegate frontage. And there are later additions to the rear, late Victorian or Edwardian era industrial buildings that infilled the back of that property and the area between the former garden of 88 to 90 Micklegate. The building as it stands at the moment, with the Micklegate property to the rear. It's the southwestern elevation as existing. So this is the original, although heavily altered Mews building with the later industrial buildings in the back. And from the other side, so this is the garden to Bathurst House? Yes. Bathurst House, which is there. And a section through. And again, the existing section showing the industrial buildings to the rear. Micklegate House. And the new the Hilton Hotel. Some photographs of the insides of the property. It stands at the moment. And then Google Earth view. So here's the extent of the property, fills the whole plot virtually. And then from the south, it's the extent of the buildings on site at the moment. Moving to the proposals. It's a proposed site plan. Proposed ground floor. So this shows the extent of the music venue, the re-provision of pre-existing use on the site. The entrance lobby to the office building, and then some shared back of house. There's bike sheds, bike storage, I should say, shed, waste storage. first floor, showing the office suite and then the garden. Accessed from the offices, as you see through those double doors. The second floor, again, an office suite. And roof plats. It's a design of the frontage. Well, that doesn't come out very well. Apologies for that. But showing that street scene. A northeast elevation, so from that garden of Bathurst House. It's the furthest extent of the office at first and second floor level. Then from the other side. And then from the rear with a section through. And then a section, so you can see the outline of the existing premises. This will be that'll be a ridged roof, if you remember the photographs we saw before. And then dropping down with a hip to the rear, where it abuts Fishergate House, and then that's the garden terrace level. So you can see the step up in scale. This is a detail of the Toft Green frontage. And then a detail at the rear, showing these timber fins, which will help in terms of both restricting solar gain and then also privacy issues overlooking between premises. And then a street scene elevation from Toft Green, so the building, frontage building here. Just to the application has been with us one time and has been significantly amended from what was originally submitted. Members will, from the reference to the consultations, a number of the consultations haven't been updated, so we didn't receive further consultations to the responses to the amended plans. So some of them refer to the 3-story height on frontage and things like that. And so just to point out that the building has been amended since a lot of those consultations were received, and what is in front of you is what is for consideration. I don't know if you want just to go back to any of the other slides.
Any members like to see any slides again? Or are you all happy with what you've seen? Nope, appears all.
We do have an update to the plans, to the report, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Go through it in stages. The first part relates to amendments to the report, paragraph 5.33. It should read, subject to any permission being appropriately conditioned, the development would not be precluded on archaeological grounds following on from the results of the submitted predetermination evaluation. City archaeologist has supplemented her earlier comments following the receipt of the evaluation, referring to a preference for a raft foundation design, and there is a draft condition related to a foundation design with referencing fewer pile locations as possible, with a thickness of slab and beams also as narrow as possible. Provision of surface water under lift shaft may result in some disturbance to Roman levels. There are a series of draft conditions to address impacts that are suggested within the report. Public Protection have come back with a further response requesting, and you'll see it at the very end of the update, a post-completion verification report in terms of the effectiveness of the noise mitigation measures and indicate any remedial works which may be secured. We have had an additional representation from the York Civic Society wishing to withdraw their earlier objection on the basis of the reduction in scale of the scheme and the recreation of the roof garden of a setting to a Micklegate house on the Micklegate street frontage. It is felt that the scheme could be improved by a hard landscaping scheme on the street frontage of Toft Green. Condition 29 should be amended to allow for the prospect of demolition works to take place in association with the post-determination archaeological works. There was identified a conflict beforehand, and condition 30 is to read additionally that the development should not be occupied until the waste stores have been completed in accordance with the approved drawings, and the stores will be retained for waste, and that no glass bottles should be placed for collection between 11 and 7 in the morning. And the final item is the verification report in terms of the noise insulation measures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, again, would you like to speak, or do you want to?
There's just a couple of points of clarification in the report,
Yeah.
if I may.
Yep.
Thank you. Just paragraph 5.26, I believe is inaccurate, because it says the site has been vacant since 2017, and I thought that seemed a little bit early, and I double checked this afternoon. Fibbers, the venue, actually announced its closure on the 5th of January 2020. So it's a bit more recent than 2017. And then just as a point of clarity, page 122, paragraph condition 23, it says the authority which ensures that no disturbance shall be made to archaeological deposits below 18,000 metres, which obviously would be extremely deep. I don't think meters. Yes. 18 meters KOD. There's a decimal point. Yeah. Thank you.
That would be deeper than any excavation I think ever done. But anyway. Okay, so clarified that. Would members be happy to keep further questions so we've heard from the public consultees in the interest of time? Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll get the public consultees to speak. The first speaker is Ravi Majithia, who is speaking in objection. Welcome to the meeting. You'd like to get yourself, take your seat with pleasure. Yes. You press the button, the mic button. That's right. And then you have 3 minutes. I'll give you about a warning with about 30 seconds to go.
Ravi Majithia, Director of Avantis Hotels. Avantis are a family-run business that develop, own and successfully operate the Hampton by Hilton opposite the applicant site since 2012. Despite difficult trading conditions, we have consistently contributed to aid and improve the public realm through large business rate contributions. In contrast, the Gentlemen's Club, nightclub and music venue traded unsuccessfully in this location. To quote O'Neill Associates, the poor trading history coupled with track record of disturbance by the venue demonstrates there's no cultural requirement in this location. O'Neill's also acknowledged the benefits of an office block would outweigh any perceived harm from loss of the former use on the site. The applicant North Star sought our support to promote the office development, stating, "We're replacing something that has caused issues with rowdy behaviour and noise with something that's much quieter." Furthermore, O'Neill's planning statement berates the use class as a music venue, stating the former nightclub music venue could not be considered necessary to meet the community's day-to-day needs, going on to say assessment should also consider the antisocial impact of the former late-night use, which caused noise and disturbance to residential and guest accommodation. We appreciate decisions should guard against the unnecessary loss of the venue, but it's hard to place value and support a legacy use class that has continually failed in this particular location. The Hampton has endured a £250,000 loss as a direct result of the venue. 88k of additional acoustic glazing was installed, including a contribution to Fibbers acoustic improvements. Other damages caused by patrons of the music venue include thousands of pounds worth of guest refunds through noise complaints, negative reviews on social media, staff abuse and threats, both verbally and physically, female staff resignations due to anxiety, cleaning costs and time to remove the vomit and bodily fluid from the hotel's entrance, narcotics and illegal substances left in the hotel's entrance and being used directly outside. How would councillors feel if they wanted to stay at our hotel given the above? If councillors are minded to approve this application, we strongly recommend specific areas are carefully conditioned. Higher acoustic performance, detailed M&E plans showing locations of the equipment, creation of an internal vestibule, reduced operational hours, robust waste management plan, widening of the footpath for public safety. We urge councillors to seriously consider the viability of the scheme. Poor location coupled with harsh economic conditions will force Jimmy's, the proposed operator, to drop ticket prices and alcohol prices, trade later into the evening to cover their costs, leading to greater consumption of alcohol, greater disturbance, nuisance and rowdy behaviour. Previous operators may have mismanaged the operations, but Jimmy does not appear to have a transparent financial track record, with a number of dissolved or dormant companies, compulsory strike-offs, voluntary strike-offs, micro company accounts showing little to no assets or cash, and a history of late filings as per Companies House. Finally, Historic England raised a strong objection to the initial scheme, but it appears other consultees have not been reconsulted and their updated responses are not published online for public scrutiny or review.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for coming to speak to us this evening.
Thank you.
I'm just going to comment that I think that some of the allegations you've made there are incredibly strong. And I'll just remind you that this is a public meeting. I do think you do need to be careful about what you allege about other businesses.
I think
that's
everything
not my
is
question. I'm just making that point.
No, and I'd like to make in response.
Sorry, I haven't asked a question yet. I'm just warning you that we are in a public sphere, and I do think you just need to be a little bit careful. That's my question to you. My point to you. My question to you is, as you said, you came to this location in 2012. So you were fully aware that there was a venue that's been operating there since 1987. So did you not anticipate that you may have to think about how your venue would operate alongside a pre-existing business? Because the legislation is quite clear that it's you are the agent of change, aren't you, in this situation?
Yeah, I understand. There's a former use class that is there. As a Hilton branded hotel, I want to make very clear that our standards of building are actually much higher than the general standards that are required by building control. So our acoustics in our rooms are extremely high because that is actually an American requirement. It's an American company. They therefore enforce their standards on us here in Britain. So we thought, great, we've actually got a standard that's far higher for the acoustic glazing for noise in guest rooms. We then had these massive complaints when we opened. We lost £50,000 in guest complaints, which I can prove. As a business, we decided to improve the acoustics even further than what Hilton required. We spent £80,000, which in my objection that has been published and given to the council shows the receipt for that. So that's a statement of fact. We then gave £8,000 to Fibbers because we wanted to work with them. We understand it's a cultural venue. We came in second to them. We said, we'll give you £8,000. Please, can you also upgrade your acoustics? We want to work with you. Those acoustics were stripped out without our knowledge. And again, we faced the same issues. So I think on that basis, we've shown that we want to work with the venue, but they were rather unwilling. I'd also like to just go back to the point about statement of fact. I think everything that I've written here is factually accurate. I've taken those statements directly from the previous scheme that was an office block. I've got the email from the applicant when they were wishing for our support for the office block. I can prove the losses. I can prove, and actually I submitted in my objection, the staff abuse and threats, negative reviews on social media. It's out in the public domain. And I think as for the statement about operators, I think if you go on Companies House, which is a public forum, anyone can go on it. You can see the trading history of the proposed operator.
Right. I believe you have a supplementary, Councillor Crawshaw.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a couple of supplementaries, if I may, that are sort of linked and related. So obviously you were operating for 8 years alongside the pre-existing music venue, and that pre-existing music venue can continue to operate as a music venue as it currently is.
Of course.
It hasn't been served with a noise abatement order, I believe. So when you say that there's been noise issues, they've obviously not reached the level at which any formal action has been taken against the venue in that 8-year period.
So,
and within the application that's here, there's quite stringent conditions, I believe, around installation and noise. So this would actually be an upgrade from the current situation, would it not?
So firstly, we did complain to the council formally in writing. Hilton also wrote a letter to the council, and that letter,
action didn't follow from that.
The council decided not to take action despite our concerns. And your second point about this being an upgrade to what's there. Firstly, I think O'Neill's also stated in the planning application for the office that this former Fibbers only operated sporadically during term time because there isn't a demand in that location really. So that's the first point. The second point is that whilst it might be an improvement, the issue is that this is double the capacity from 250 to 500 people, is it not?
Sorry, just a point of clarification. I think it's a slight reduction in the capacity. It's a 500 capacity venue is being proposed. I think it was a 550 capacity venue previously, and it has been, I think, as high as a 700 capacity when the full club was opening as one single venue.
Could I just come with a supplementary? You'll appreciate that this is purely for a music venue with offices above. Previously, there was also a gentleman's club and whiskey lounge, the Stein Beer Keller, and a music venue, a nightclub as well. It was operated a nightclub. Would you not agree that those may have contributed a significant amount of disturbance? Because things like a beer keller, for example, can be phenomenally noisy. They have that kind of environment. So are you right in ascribing all the nuisance purely to the previous music use?
I agree that there's obviously a change in the use in a sense that it's no longer a gentleman's club. Fantastic. It's no longer a nightclub. But what particularly worries us is obviously queues into the streets, because that's going to be noise breakout. The design doesn't have an internal vestibule to contain that noise breakout when there is queuing of 500 people before things open, before the doors open. You've then got a question mark over the operators, really. All of this is down to how the operation is run, because they're still going to be serving alcohol. It still is a venue that's playing music. Yes, it's live music as opposed to piped music. So there is a lot of parallel in a sense. It's just put under a slightly different name.
Thank you. But then I'd follow that up by asking you, surely that if the people are going into a concert and the concert times conditions are restricted the hours of use, if they're going in before that, they're not going to be interfering with the sleep of your residents, because they'll be going in about 8:30, 9 o'clock. So
but they'll need to come out, won't they?
They will need to come out.
They'll have had alcohol, and possibly after a music event, I suspect Jimmy's, having looked at their other operations, serves food and would trade afterwards, serving food and alcohols. They wouldn't just say, right, the music stopped, 10 o'clock, the band's off, we're going to then get people out at 10 o'clock. They would look to obviously maximise their trading, as any business would, and therefore they would trade later into the evening. And given that this is a satellite location, I would be concerned that they would try to cover the harsh economic conditions by, as I've said, reducing alcohol prices, trading later into the evening to cover extortionate costs of utilities at the moment, for example.
Thank you. In that case, well, thank you very much for your contribution, and we'll take your views into account in the down session. Our second speaker tonight is Juliet Spencer, who is speaking. One of the neighbours, it doesn't say whether she's speaking in objection, but I think have comments to make.
Hello.
You've got 3
Hi.
minutes. If you'd like to turn your microphone on, I'll give you a warning with 30 seconds to go.
Is it on? I think it's on. Okay, thank you. Hello, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Juliet Spencer. I work for Portland Fuel. We are the direct neighbours of 3 Toft Green. We are number 1 Toft Green. So we are the old coach house of Bathurst House on Micklegate. We are not against the development in principle because obviously it's a total eyesore, the property as it is now. There's been squatters, there's been all sorts of things going on. So we are not against it. However, we would like to ask the councillors to defer their decision until more detailed plans are in place. Specifically, we have 3 major concerns, and these concerns have been mentioned at least 3 times in our representations, firstly in January 2020, and then I think 2 other times. And our concerns have not changed. And we feel we've had a total lack of communication from the property developers. They have not knocked on our door once to talk about our concerns, because we're not against the development. We would just like the following to be taken into account. There's a lack of a construction environment management plan. And we are very worried about the demolition and then the subsequent building. Demolition will be hugely noisy, obviously, and dusty and dirty. There will be loads of builders' trucks. You can imagine the welfare, everything of the people working on site. Piling will then be hugely detrimental to us as an office. We operate from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m, 5 days a week, and we have a long party wall against the site of 3 Toft Green. So we would just like to know that there will be communication from the developers. And given there hasn't been any up to now, we have no confidence that they will take into account the fact that we run a successful business. We employ 25, well, actually we have another site as well. We employ lots of local people, and we want to be able to continue operating in our offices. So that's our kind of main problem, that they haven't really bothered to talk to us. And we're very open to discussions because we are not against the development. Secondly, we think that there's not really a venue operating plan. I'm not going to bang on about Jimmy's, but, you know, Jimmy's might not take it over. We've got to be prepared that, you know, in 2 or 3 years' time, it might be a different nightclub owner. So on the council website, there was a couple of representations from this Jimmy's saying how we're going to operate, how we're going to do that. But they might not be around. They might decide they don't want to do the venue. So should not that kind of operating plan come from the site developer rather than from random company who might work there? And then thirdly, I suppose I'll just go on again about the total lack of communication that we've had from the developers, and everything we've had from them is these beautiful pictures of what it's going to look like. But what about the nitty gritty of how they're going to demolish fibbers, how they're going to construct, and then how they're going to run the site for the benefit of all the people who live and work around this area for the next, 10, 20 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do members have any questions? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for coming to speak to us. Just to sort of, because you asked us to defer, and I understand exactly the points that you're raising, and I don't know whether you'll have read the papers in the way that we have to read the papers.
In the way you have. No, I don't think so.
Condition 10, which is on page 119, says prior to commencement of the development, a construction environment management plan for all of those things that you're talking about has to be agreed in writing with the local authority. And again, at condition 15, which is on page 120, because exactly that point that you raised around the operator potentially of the music.
I would say that if I had been granted planning, would I take these really seriously after the event?
Sorry, just to read you what's in the conditions. Again, it says prior to the first prior to being first brought into use, a detailed management plan, including details of noise insulation, visitor management, operating hours. So the 2 points of the elements that you've raised, aside from anything about the communication from the applicant, I think are covered in terms of the conditions that are in here. And I just, because you're asking us to defer, what those conditions mean, as I understand it, is if we grant permission, you still can't actually develop the site until those 2 things have been agreed. So would that be enough to satisfy you in terms of? Well, because if we defer it,
I understand. I think if we felt any confidence in the communication from the developers, and where someone said earlier 2.5 years, it's actually 3 years. January 2020 was the first time we put anything in. So if there had been communication over the last 3 years, I would say yes.
but there has been zero communication. So I would say actually, I don't know, because I don't know anything really about how you operate, but do we have 100% confidence that they will really do all these things once they've got planning? So that's what I'm saying, you know, I don't know, because I don't know how these things work. But...
No, so thank you for that. I think the law is that they can't do things unless it's been agreed by the planning authority.
Yeah, but we have to then employ people to help us put our case forward. If it's not done, we would have to employ, because we can't do this because we don't know anything about how it works. So I would actually have to pay money.
We put conditions on all applications if we approve them. Those conditions are met unless, and if they're not, then enforcement action takes place to rectify the situation. So I think your fears are somewhat groundless.
Possibly,
We will enforce conditions if they are imposed on this application, should we choose to approve it.
Fair enough.
Councillor Crawshaw.
If I'm sorry, I realise this is possibly slightly out of the loop of how we would normally do things, but I'm just wondering from the point of view of the person speaking, when the local authority is actually drawing up that construction plan and the operating hours and those sort of things in those conditions, is there a mechanism by which they could feed in to that process, or would that just be a conversation that would happen between the authority and the applicant?
The local authority doesn't draw it up. It's a submission by the applicant. Whilst the documents are publicly available, so if you as a local resident or interested party, if you'd registered for updates on a certain case, then in theory you should be alerted to the submission of an approval of details application. And whilst legally there isn't, it's not the same as a planning application, so there's no legal requirement for the council to take into account representations made. We would, in practice, if people make representations. We don't get that many to approve of details applications, but it can be there's no reason why it can't be a public process, but it does tend to be dealt with more quickly than a planning application, especially this application. So it is out there and people are able to comment.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ms. Spencer? Nope. In that case, I'll thank you very much for your contribution. We'll take your views into account and make our decision. Our third speaker is Councillor Peter Kilbane, who's speaking in his capacity as ward councillor. I think you know the procedure. I don't need to go through it for you. 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks, Chair. As the committee knows, planning policy D3 and HW1 in the draft local plan protect cultural venues and community facilities. 3 years ago, at this very committee, myself and Councillor Crawshaw argued that the proposed conversion of Club Salvation on Rougier Street into holiday apartments was in contradiction of policy D3. At the time, we argued that nightclubs and music venues were as significant cultural spaces to the people they served as theatres and opera houses. Unfortunately, on that occasion, we were unsuccessful, and the planning committee's refusal to protect the venue mirrored a common attitude amongst the public that these spaces were not of cultural worth. However, we were encouraged by the messages we received from students and young people saying how much they appreciated an old fuddy-duddy in the council standing up for them because they felt as though their culture was generally disapproved of and how they were running out of places to go for a night out, which was not centred around drinking. They also talked about how if we lose York's late night venues, then we will also lose the creativity of the artists and the crowds who enjoy them and the energy and talents that they bring. Many told us they would leave York once they had finished their studies for this reason. We were also concerned that the residents of the city were having to travel further afield to experience the joys of live music and clubbing when our own planning policies were designed to ensure that those venues are available on their doorstep. We just started to campaign on this issue when the original application to demolish the Fibbers music venue and replace it with offices was submitted. So we lobbied hard to protect what was the only 500 capacity music venue in the city. We lobbied the developer, we lobbied our own planning team, and we campaigned in local media. And I'm pleased to see in the application before you today that the 500 capacity music venue is retained. My only disappointment is that it does not include a nightclub. Therefore, I withdraw my objection and would like to publicly thank the developers and the City of York planners for taking their obligations under D3 seriously. I urge the committee to do likewise in both this and any forthcoming applications that, to quote, cause the loss of venues or spaces that deliver cultural opportunities, activities or services. As a postscript, I might add that Club Salvation survives for now, and I was delighted that my eldest and his friends danced there till 4 in the morning on the night of their A-level results. And I remember back in late 2019, my youngest coming floating back into the house, having been to her first proper gig at Fibbers. I didn't have the heart to tell her that it was closing within a month, and I had no idea if a similar sized venue would replace it. I'm pleased to say that before you today are plans for just such a venue. I urge you to approve it, and if the committee is minded to do so, then you will help breathe creativity, energy and cultural vitality back into the city, and a generation of young people will be grateful, as indeed will be 1 or 2 old fuddy-duddies. Thank you.
Well done, you squeezed that exactly in 3 minutes. Are there any questions from members for Councillor Kilbane? Nope, in that case, thank you very much for your contribution. We'll take your views into consideration while we make our decision. Yeah. Okay, we have one final group of speakers. Now, I understand one of these speakers has changed, but I don't know which one. It's Richard Craig, Philip Holmes, Neil Brown, who are from the developers, Jimmy's Music Venue and the associates, Neil Associates and Vincent Brown. And I gather Janice Neil is also present to answer questions if required. So do you actually wish to speak for 3 minutes, or are you just happy to take comments and questions from?
We'll speak for 3 minutes.
That's
I'll share with
fine.
Richard Craig, who's speaking on behalf of Jimmy's, and it's Rob Miller who's replacing Neil Brown from Vincent Brown.
Okay. If you'd like to start your 3 minutes,
Chair.
and I'll give you a warning with 30 seconds to go.
The proposed scheme is for a new building that will provide a purpose-built live music venue of 600 square metres and 1,000 square metres of Grade A office space with a rear landscape garden providing separation to the Grade 1 listed Micklegate House. This represents a viable future use for the vacant site, and the principle of development is consistent with planning policy supporting the reuse of previously developed land and the vitality of city centres. The scheme now recommended for approval has evolved over a period of 2 years in context of comments received during consultation and with input from senior planning officers. Substantial changes have been made to reduce the building scale and massing, and the design approach for the Toft green facade and rear elevation facing Micklegate House has been refined. The existing building is in poor condition, has been subject to many detrimental alterations and extensions, including unsympathetic interventions to the frontage building and former industrial buildings which abut and detract from the setting of Micklegate House. We believe the scheme represents an appropriate and a contextual response to the site surroundings, which will make a positive contribution to the character and appearance of the conservation area and the setting of neighbouring listed buildings. It will help meet an identified need for modern Grade A city centre offices after years of under provision, and provide a dedicated live music venue in accordance with the established use of the site.
Jimmy's is an experienced independent business operating successful live music venues since we opened our first venue in Manchester's Northern Quarter in December 2016. We do have a passion to support established and emerging talent and to deliver live music in Manchester and Liverpool, and aim to provide the same experience at the Toft Green venue in York. York is our home. The directors of Jimmy's, my 2 sons and myself, we know and love York, live in Helmsley. We know the context of Toft Green very well, and we do understand the concerns of neighbouring occupiers in relation to issues associated with its former use. Unlike the previous use, we will be operating at York's first purpose-built music venue with state-of-art noise insulation and noise mitigation essentially baked in to the building design. The capacity of our venue will be less than with the former uses, and standard opening times will be significantly reduced from the previous operation, which could open until 4 a.m. 7 nights a week. Accessibility and inclusivity are very important to Jimmy's, and this has been a priority of the venue design. We have successfully operated in 2 similar city centre locations for 6 years with tried and tested management plans. We'd be very happy to work with the council to agree a plan for our York venue to cover measures to limit external noise and address issues of antisocial behaviour that occurred with the previous use of fibbers. Ultimately, we do wish to be good neighbours that existing residents and businesses want us to be, while maintaining a music use for the site and securing its contribution to the city's cultural life. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Do members have any questions for Councillor Crawshaw?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming to speak to us this evening. You've heard a few people raising concerns around the way that the new music venue element of this will operate, and you talked a little bit there about the willingness to you know, be a good neighbour and things. I'm looking at the report on page 116, paragraph 5.38. It just says, you know, the new music venue will be specifically designed with the management of users and the control of noise in mind. I just wondered if you could give us a little bit more detail about, you know, how the design of the space can control noise, can you know, sort of speak to some of the elements that have been raised, and also I appreciate in one sense it's not something that's a planning thing, but we had that little bit of discussion earlier with the previous speaker about the wish to be able to have some input on the way in which the operation agreement will be made with the council, and I just wondered if you might be willing to acknowledge that and accept that you'd have a conversation with them about how that could come about.
Yeah, a couple of questions there then. Yeah, I think the first thing to recognise is the previous operation and this operation are chalk and cheese really in terms of what we're seeking to do and what the impacts will be. So the previous use had a mishmash of uses including the gentleman's club, a nightclub, the beer cellar. What we're providing is a purpose-built music venue. Our figures for the capacity of the previous venue was that it would be 850 total in terms of the music venue nightclub use, and in addition you had the upper floor gentleman's club. We've got a capacity of 500 people. The building and noise insulation is baked into the building design, so essentially that means that we're addressing it at source from start. And we do have the noise consultant if you want to have a question on that, just to probably better explain what we're doing there, if Chris, you want to come up. But ultimately we know that the council's environmental protection officer is more than content in terms of noise breakout issues, that there shouldn't be any meaningful impacts on neighbouring properties in that regard. We're exceeding the requirements in terms of sort of noise insulation for that. I don't know if you just want to pick up on that first of all, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Councillors, Chair. We've reviewed the core design of the building. We've input into that design. As acoustic consultants, we work heavily within the hospitality industry. We count 2 of the country's largest pub chains as our clients, including, and also nightclubs, bar operators across the country. So we're used to designing music venues, entertainment venues, and that kind of space. Ultimately, the core design of the building is very different to the one that sits there now. The existing building is a mishmash of different constructions, with principally a very lightweight roof construction. The design moving forward will effectively enclose the music venue use within broadly a cavity concrete box, which contains a significantly greater mass than the existing structure. And ultimately, when you're looking to control music noise, the primary area that you're needing to manage is the lower frequencies. Low frequency noise is stopped by two things: isolation and the physical mass of a structure. So within the core design of this, we have isolation built into the walls with the cavity design, and we also have high mass structure in terms of the not just the walls, but ultimately what will be the roof of the venue, which will then have the office block sat on top of it, the office space sat on top of it. So if you like, the music venue bit of the design is built into that sort of bunker sounds the wrong word, but you probably kind of get my idea of what I mean. So that presents a much more significantly robust acoustic design than that which is there now.
Can I just can I just add on to that in terms of the scope of operations, as the standard operating times? What the intention is that this will primarily function as a live music venue. There will be club nights, Councillor Kilbane will be pleased to hear, but primarily that will be the use. The standard operating hours therefore will be in the region of midday to midnight. The gigs would themselves close at 11 p.m, which is sort of standard curfew time for gigs, allowing some dispersal of gig goers. There will be club nights, but they will end at 3 o'clock in the morning. It's not the same scope as operations as was at the previous venue. As we said, it was 4 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week. So I think that's also worth pointing out.
Thanks. Yeah, the additional bit that I wanted to just sort of pick up though within that, because I appreciate absolutely the you know, how you manage the noise that comes from it within the building, but the other issue that you have with large capacity venues is the noise that comes from the people that are leaving the building, and in particular things like smoking areas and that sort of thing. And I just wondered what thought had been given to the management of the sort of operation of, you know, as I think the previous speaker said, if you've got 500 people queuing up to come into the building, and obviously that would be great for yourselves, great for the culture of the city and all of that sort of thing. Once they're in the building, how are you then managing them moving around the building, and particularly when they're coming outside of the building, you know, either during the gig or at the end of the evening?
If I can answer that. We currently operate a music venue in Liverpool, which operates on 3 floors. So we're very experienced at a multi-level basis and people coming and going. We've got a management team, first class, and we employ high quality door staff as well. So a single floor, 500 cap venue is not going to represent anything new to us. The other thing about 500 people as a worst case scenario is that we have never had 500 or whatever the capacity is of any of our venues turn up at one time. It just doesn't happen in real terms. People come and go over time, and we've never experienced some major issue with a 500 people or whatever coming and going at the same time. In terms of queuing, we don't have any queues. Our capacity in Liverpool, for example, is 550. With e-tickets, the days of queuing up to buy your ticket have gone. That's quite a principal part of the way we operate. So in terms of management of people coming in, that really isn't a problem. People come and go over the period of time. So I think we are very confident in terms of management because we're experienced and happy to work with a management plan with the council if necessary.
I have some different questions that are not on this slide.
Yes.
So I don't know if other people have questions they wanted to, but I'm happy to keep asking.
I think you have a
Thank you, Chair. So I also wanted to just address because obviously we've talked about the music venue element of this scheme. It does involve this scheme does involve the demolition of you know, existing buildings which, you know, are in a poor state, but I think that there has been a case that's been put that these are buildings that really ought to have been listed as part of the grade 1 listing of the building at the front. And I just wondered if you could talk to us a little bit about how you feel that the design of what's being proposed reflects or is in, you know, how is it going to be in addition to the conservation area? Because, you know, this is a sensitive location. I think there was some criticism made in the initial responses, and Gareth did clarify that they were to the original design that's been amended, but we don't have anything that necessarily speaks to how the design has been amended to take on board those comments.
Yeah, can I just before we go on to the design of the proposed scheme, pick up on the existing building? I don't think anyone was suggesting it was of a quality that it should be listed. It's whether it was curtilage listed in terms of Micklegate House, and that's been assessed and is covered quite clearly in Eric's report to say that it shouldn't. And the existing building has been altered to an extent that there's no real semblance or legible connection with that now. So in terms of that being a heritage asset, I don't think that's the issue. But obviously there's an issue in terms of what we put back, whether it's contextual and appropriate for the setting, which I'll hand over to Rob on.
Well, so basically we've been through a almost 3-year period on consultation on this scheme, and as you'll see, we've had a number of iterations of design, and the final one where we've got to we've looked at, well, we've reduced the whole building by a story. This now, as you can see by the illustrative street elevation at the front, fits in keeping with the scale of the Toft Green itself. The building is seen as a 2-story building, and it's been designed in red brick, which is a predominant material on the street. And whilst it has contemporary brick detailing, they have nods to the historic buildings on the street. We're being quite clear to concentrate on looking at the southern side of Toft Green rather than the northern side, where you have larger, more significant and contemporary buildings, and that's quite a key element. The council officer in his report says it's a modest increase in size, and what we've tried to do is be in keeping with the neighbour properties. Throughout the period of consultation to the rear, we've really tried to be conscious of the neighbours. The faceted facade and almost sculptural facade at the back is to look at mitigating overlooking issues from both Bathurst House, Micklegate House, and the neighbouring building. That ensures that all outlook is maintained within our red line. Obviously, there's vulnerable people in the hostel opposite, and we're very conscious about that. The design also removes the warehouse, which is a harm to the Grade 1 listed building. We've significantly reduced the height on the rear, so we're 3.2 metres shorter than the existing building at the rear. We reinstate a garden at the rear, which has this nod to the historic Georgian garden at the back of Micklegate House. So all in all, we've tried to be sympathetic, and we've tried to be subservient to Micklegate House and concentrate on being a benefit to this area of York rather than a negative.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you. And just a final question, which is just around the operation of the offices themselves, because obviously we've been thinking about the operation of the music venue. So there is this rear garden sort of element to this. And I wanted to just understand, is your expectation that there would be a sort of a single occupier of the offices that would then have exclusive access to the rear garden? Would it be sort of a range of different businesses that might be coming and going, and would anybody else have access to that rear garden space, or is it just the people who are using the offices that would be able to?
I think the answer is we don't know. The office accommodation could be subdivided. I think the idea is that courtyard is used for office workers who are at that building. Certainly there's no use by the music venue at all, so it would only be during the working hours, and it'd be restricted to use by office workers at that building.
And do you have a sense yet of how many office workers it's likely to be in the occupying the building? I do appreciate that. I'm just,
there's certain metrics.
It's 10 or 100, you know.
there's certain metrics you can use in terms of floor space, and that probably arrives you at about 90 office staff. But you know, post-COVID, occupiers are looking for different types and more flexible use of offices, so it might not be that much, but we're working on about that figure.
Well done. Thank you very much. Any other members got questions for team? In that case, oh, sorry, Councillor Traghill, just in time.
Just very quickly, and apologies if I missed this, but as I remember, Councillor Crawshaw might remember, was asking about the CEMP, and you explained how it's developed. And there was the concerns from the speaker from number 1 Toft Green. I just wondered, I don't think in planning terms we can condition that you talk to the speaker at number 1, but would you be happy to do that as you produce the CEMP?
Yeah, the applicants has stated they're happy to engage with the neighbours. Obviously, it's a constrained site and particularly sensitive for number 1. So happy to engage on that and taking it forward. And obviously, as it was mentioned before, once it goes in, it will be conditioned. So there'll be opportunity to comment on it once it's submitted formally as well, before approval and before construction work starts.
Right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from members? No, in that case, thank you very much for your contributions. We'll take them into account when we make our decision. Sorry. Right. Are we okay to go on through to questions and debate on this, or would you like a break? No, we'll carry on. Fine. Yeah, crack on. Okay. Okay. Have we got any questions for officers arising? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. I just had one question. and it's just about the archaeology. Because obviously this is a site that is thought to be quite rich in various deposits, and we've found up at the top of Micklegate, when we've dug down, there's been perhaps more than we've anticipated, and I know that there's a number of the buildings on Micklegate itself that have sarcophaguses in the basements and that sort of thing. I just wanted to understand page 101, paragraph 3.19, which talks about a programme of intrusive archaeological evaluation, and the last sentence says, if archaeology of national importance is found to survive on the site, preservation in situ will be expected and the design to be altered accordingly. There's obviously conditions around the archaeological survey. I just wanted to understand that last bit about the preservation in situ. Is that something that's covered in a national legislation? Is it something that's conditioned within here? I just wanted to understand, if they dig down and they find something significant, what the mechanism is then by which that actually happens.
Preservation in situ is generally the standard for what we look for, and our own policies are about this. You see the 95% damage to foundations, so that foundation design. But they will have to carry out, it says, an invasive a dig to find out what's there, because we haven't been able to do that as yet. There will be, the archaeology is going to be it's likely to be quite close to the surface, and it will be disturbed, and there's no option.
The reason I'm asking is because I think, if I'm right in the design, the floor as it currently is gets dropped slightly to accommodate the space. And if they were to find something of national significance at that point, and we were insisting on, do we have the power to preserve in situ and say, no, actually, you've got to go away and redesign your basement? Or does it just get recorded and removed, I suppose?
We don't have the power. Once planning permission is granted, that's it. It would be an issue of negotiation if something was of national significance. If it was of national significance and it was seen as important to be scheduled, for example, then that would introduce a different.
Yes. And there's a framework in place to accommodate that.
Could be.
Yep.
That's essentially what I'm just getting at. It's just this last line here that says,
yes,
it would be expected, and I'm just wondering what the mechanism is by which.
Yes, but there is a bit of a legislative gap between having granted permission and then finding something you didn't expect to find. But there are conditions about the scheme investigation. There are conditions about foundations and how that's designed, and the two things can really work hand in hand to avoid any unnecessary, not unnecessary, that's the wrong word, unavoidable harm to archaeological deposits. Let's see.
Okay, any further questions to officers? Nope, in that case, I'll open it to debate. I just remind you, if anyone is to make a proposal in terms of the recent constitution, the proposal must be, the first proposal we must test is the recommendation for approval. So if anyone would like to open up, Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, it's inevitable that any change of this nature is going to cause some concern to neighbours. One of the things I've learned over the years, the perception doesn't become reality, in as much as people fear the worst, and of course it rarely happens. I think that this development, and I'm not I enjoy music. I'm not quite sure I've enjoyed the music that was being played in this venue. Having said that, we might even have a chamber orchestra in there for a concert or something of that ilk. But I think it's absolutely vital in this day and age that we have these kind of venues. And I'm heartened, if that's the right word. I'm confident, let me put it that way, that the company is going to do its level best to be a good neighbour. We can all sit on the sidelines and find reasons to kick something into touch, as it were. But I do think, in this case, what we've heard tonight, I think certainly gives me confidence that it is going to be well managed and well run. And let's be perfectly honest about it. Any demolition, any building work does cause disruption. Can't avoid it, but at least it will disappear of that kind of disruption. So I have no hesitation whatsoever, Chair, in proposing the officer's recommendation as per the agenda.
Thank you. I'm very happy to second that. As people may have noticed from my T-shirt, I do attend a lot of live music concerts. We have a medium-sized venue, 250, which is the Crescent, which is where I'm on Sunday night to see York's wonderful local band, mostly Autumn. There's also the Barbican, which is a big venue. What we lack is that middle-sized venue since FIB has disappeared, the 500, which is for up-and-coming bands. Now, I have to temper my desire to get that middle-sized venue to make sure that it fits the actual street scene, that is not going to cause disruption to other residents of the area. I'm satisfied from having looked at the design that the design is an improvement on what there is in Toft Green at the moment. And I think the original design, which was grossly too big, has been modified. And the introduction of the roof terrace and the demolition of the buildings behind will actually improve the situation regarding Micklegate House, which obviously a grade 1 listed building you have to be very sensitive about. I appreciate there can be noise problems from venues, but I think, remember the Crescent, when they were wanting to build, change the dwelling next door into holiday accommodation, we're very careful to look at that situation. With a suitable acoustic screening, acoustic design, noise from venues can be mitigated, can be minimised. So I'm happy it will not cause the same sort of problems that the hotel across the road has had under the previous use. So I'm happy to second approval in line with officer's recommendations. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I also, happy to support the officer recommendation. I think it's really, really important that as a planning authority, if we make local plan policies around protecting cultural venues and that sort of thing, that we then robustly enforce or apply them. When this application first came forward, I think there was a concern that we would lose something which was important for the city. And so it's really, really heartening to see that actually as an authority, we've taken that local plan D3, which says you have to protect, and if you don't protect in that location, you have to provide it somewhere else, and that the applicant has taken that on board and has come up with a design which actually office space often sits alongside nighttime use very, very well in a way that perhaps residential doesn't always work in that way. So it seems to me that it's a very good development to get the best of both things within it. I do think that there were some very legitimate concerns raised around the original design in terms of the setting, and particularly the nature of Toft Green with its own distinct character that was a little bit different than Micklegate and other parts of the city. And I think whilst it perhaps doesn't go absolutely all the way, we've clearly got to a compromise point with this application. And I think my hope is that actually this will be a really, really positive addition to the cultural landscape of the city, and in particular this part of York, which with the Crescent nearby and one or two other venues nearby that are doing interesting live music, it just gives us that right mix of different types of venues. So I think that's really positive.
Thank you. Councillor Looker.
Yes, I share with Councillor Galvin. I suspect I shall never enter Fibbers. I never have entered Fibbers in all its previous iterations, because it used to be down underneath the Stoner. But I didn't go then, and I was a lot younger then. So I don't think it's my style of music at all. But I think what encourages me is that it is going to be focused on a music venue, that we have lost perhaps some of the more odd ancillary occupations of the site. At least as I understand it, the Gentlemen's Club, the Whiskey Lounge and the Beer Keller have gone. And I think that will make a significant difference to the way the building is used. A venue which is focused on providing live music is different from a venue that is, I don't know what gentlemen's clubs do because they don't invite me in. But I do suspect that they are not necessarily noted for their muted, calm, responsible behaviour. And beer kellers are obviously focused on beer. So I think I must agree that this is a good amendment, and I think hopefully, I'm hopeful that they will work well, both with their immediate neighbours and also that we can satisfy the concerns of the hotel opposite, because that is, again, a very, very, very useful and proper addition to York's hospitality range. So I would like to see all of them thrive and prosper and make Toft Green a good place to go.
Thank you. I'll take Councillor Orwell, and I think I may test the vote on this one, if that's okay. Councillor Orwell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't repeat everything that everybody else has said, which I agree with, but I think it's encouraging that the report says that there's been a detailed report on environmental standards that the application is prepared to go to. And I'm sure our officers will be making sure that all those conditions are met. So I think that's encouraging, Chair.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's been proposed and seconded. We've had a good airing of views. We have a proposal seconding for approval with the amended conditions. Do you want to just go through and state anything about those, or I think we've all got them in front of us.
Yeah, Chair, it's so the conditions as set out in the report, as updated by the update, with the addition of the decimal point where appropriate in that condition, whichever condition it was.
Okay, all those members in favour, would you please show? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Right, before we move on to item 4C, we need a 10-minute break to get the speakers in. So if you'd like to take advantage of that.
David Pennington.
Right, well, welcome back to those watching online to our meeting. We'll move on now to item 4C. Sorry, move on to item 4C, which is the installation of an enclosed multi-use games area pitched a playing field at the rear of Fishergate Primary School. Okay, over to you, Gareth.
Chair, just waiting for the to catch up. That's good. So this is a planning application for a multi-use games area surrounded by a 2-meter high fence, 20 meters by 15 meters in size. Just point that. There we go. So coloured in yellow on the screen. The location is probably better illustrated on the agenda, actually, with the location plan. Because this is confusingly north at the bottom, south at the top. So if you turn to page 59, you will see the Fishergate School on the frontage. It has its enclosed playground, and then its later addition of the grassed playing field to the rear, and the proposed mugger is outlined on that plan, adjacent to the school car park. Yeah, so Escrick Street heads down towards Fishergate itself. The school is grade 2 listed. It's the school building is in the conservation area, but this site isn't in the conservation area. Oh, I've got. Oops, sorry. So its location on this would have been more helpful, wouldn't it? So its location on is on Google Earth shot. There's Methodist Church, Melbourne Centre, community centre, immediately to the south, Kent Street car park, Fishergate School, one of the Briley York School Board schools, car park, and then the existing grass pitch. The proposal for the mugger is in here. Probably of most interest is down in the corner here. So that shows the small 20-15 and the mesh fencing around it. There is an update. Got a comment from flood risk management team asking for a condition to agree surface water drainage works. They state that multi-use games areas are a semi-impermeable material, and so there's likely to be some increase in surface water runoff. And they wish to see the details of drainage. Not on the update, I'm afraid. You members will have seen comments from our public protection team about hours of operation. They said that ideally the multi-use games area would be 30 metres from the nearest residential. This is about 22 metres from the nearest residential. They seek a condition limiting the use in the evening to 6 o'clock in the absence of any noise surveys. There's no floodlights proposed, so its operating hours are regulated by hours of daylight to some degree, but the 6 o'clock sort of curfew condition is something that we have put on similar games areas in similar locations. And that's the end of my update.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we have two public speakers on this tonight. We have Tina Clark, who is speaking in support. And I believe she's on Zoom, is she?
Yes, I am. Yes, sorry.
Good. We can hear you very clearly. I hope you can hear us. You have 3 minutes, and I'll give you a warning with about 30 seconds to go. Is that okay?
That's absolutely fine, yes.
Take it away.
I'm Tina Clark. I'm the head teacher of Fishergate Primary School. We've been saving up for this surface for probably at least the last 7 years. And why we want it is for our children to use. At the moment, when the weather gets more inclement, we can't use the field at all, so it's really limiting what we can do for our PE lessons. It's also means that we can't use it for playtimes. The school's grown considerably over the last few years, and we've now got well over 300 children, and we don't all fit on the playground anymore. Which means that we can't have all the children out at once. So the children are getting shorter lunchtime plays. If we were able to have this area that we could use all year round, then we would be able to, all our children would be able to have a good amount of time out in the fresh air at playtime, at lunchtime play, as well as break times. We don't need floodlights because we only want it to be used for our children, And as such, the curfew wouldn't be an issue for us either, because we wouldn't be wanting to use the field or the new area outside of school times. We sometimes have an after school club, but they're finished by 4:30. And that's my statement finished.
Thank you very much indeed. Do any members have any questions for Ms. Clark? Nope. Thank you very much indeed for your contribution, and we'll take your views into account when we come to make our decision. Thank you. Our second speaker is Dave Pennington, who is also speaking in support via Zoom. Mr. Pennington, are you there? Could you press *6 to unmute, please? Because we can't hear you at the moment.
Good evening. Is that better?
Good evening. We can now hear you loud and clear. You've got 3 minutes, and I'll give you a shout with 30 seconds to go. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name's David Pennington. I've been the PE coordinator at Fishergate School for the past decade or so. And basically, a part of that remit has been to spend what's called sports premium money, which is money that's ring-fenced to basically promote sports and PE within the school. And one of the things, as Tina was saying, is that obviously quite recently our school has grown considerably, and it was initially built for about 180 children, and now we're over 300. So in terms of kind of providing sporting opportunities, we've been kind of limited by the size of our field and what is on that field at the minute. So we have got an area that is used for football matches, and we've got a forest school area. But just in front of the entrance to the field is a kind of a dead area, which is what we've identified as an area for putting down a mugger pitch. The mugger is essentially required, as Tina was saying, for a variety of reasons, to provide additional opportunities within PE, to provide extracurricular activities, which is limited at the minute by what's on the field, and also playtimes, which is causing overcrowding on the playground. So in terms of that, we'd be able to send certain children onto this mugger area at playtimes to reduce issues around safeguarding and accidents that are currently happening on the playground. We provide house competitions during school time, and that would allow all children to take part in the competition at once rather than children having to wait. As I said, there'd be more scope for additional extracurricular opportunities. And basically, as Tina was saying, those extracurricular clubs would finish by 4:30, so it wouldn't affect the 6 o'clock curfew that was previously mentioned. I think that was everything from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one, and thanks for coming and speaking to us this evening. I just wanted to address the Sports England objection, which is around the encroachment on a 7x7 football pitch. Now, I think I know what your answer is going to be here, because already that pitch is too small, isn't it? I think anyway. So I just wondered if you could,
yes.
I just wondered if you could give us a flavour of the additional activities that might be possible to do, rather than just focusing on the loss of that football pitch.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, as you say, the football pitch is too small for use anyway. I mean, going around different schools, it's quite significantly bigger than many pitches we actually play on. But with the mugger pitch, we'd be able to put on additional extracurricular clubs such as tennis, basketball, netball. Basically, it's a multi-use games area, so lots of additional things. At the minute, we have what's called house competitions in school, whereby children will take part in different competitions, whether it be kind of football or tag rugby, hockey, whatever sport they've been studying during that term. At the minute, because the school's kind of grown quite considerably over the last decade, it used to be that children would all be able to compete at the same time, whereas at the minute, because we're limited to basically having 2 pitches on the field as it is, children are having to kind of wait out and wait their turn to take part in the tournament. Whereas if we could put that additional that mugger down in that area, we'd be able to kind of have all teams competing at once. There is lots of need for additional extracurricular clubs, and we've kind of got waiting lists for these clubs that would allow us to put an extra club on each night. So really, this, the kind of benefits of what we would get from the mugger kind of considerably, in our opinion, outweigh the kind of 2 or 3 meters we'd lose off the football pitch as it is now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further comments?
Okay.
Questions from members for Mr. Pennington? Nope. In that case, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. We'll take your views into account when we make our decision. Thank you. Okay. Do members have
thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions for officers? Councillor Craghill.
Thank you. Just one thing. The application doesn't include floodlights, and acknowledging everything that everyone said and that don't actually want to use it beyond 6 anyway. But nonetheless, just thinking from the point of view of residents, can you just clarify if they wanted to add floodlights at any point, would that require another planning application?
Yes, normally. Yes, it would.
It would. So there's no need to condition it. It would be another application.
Yes.
That would be.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from members? Nope. In that case, I'll move into debate. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I've seen how well used a very similar mugger is at Knavesmire Primary School. I can completely see how this is a really positive addition to the school. I do note that the slight reduction in the football pitch, it smacks to me of Sports England perhaps just doing a bureaucratic thing rather than necessarily looking at the whole case, and so have no hesitation in moving approval in line with the officer recommendation.
Councillor Looker.
Yes, I will second that. I know what running an inner city primary school is always challenging as far as space is concerned. The Victorians didn't necessarily consider football as a suitable recreation for young pupils in school. So, and with the British weather, muggers do make an awful lot of sense because you can use them day in, day out without the problems of either getting the grass in a mess or just not being able to use the grass because it is a mess. I think we need to pick up on the drainage. I think that is important, that condition is there to make sure that the surface water is adequately considered. But I have great pleasure in seconding this proposal.
Good. I shall certainly be supporting the proposal as well. I think that the small loss of the football pitch is more than compensated many times over by the opportunity for students to play all year round and to try different games other than just football. The one thing I would say with a mugger, having walked into an absolute nightmare at Strensall over a mugger, is they have to be a reasonable distance away from neighbouring dwellings, because if they're too close you end up with all sorts of problems. 22 metres is more than adequate to stop 11-year-olds kicking a ball or interfering with the garden, so I'm quite happy it won't cause any form of interference, so I'm happy to support this. Are there any of the members like to speak, or shall we put it to the vote? Councillor Craghill.
Just following on from what you said, Chair, and given that the applicants said they'd be quite happy with it, are we adding the 6 p.m. condition that was mentioned?
I thought that was in there.
Is it in there? Sorry, I've been looking round and
so clear, but that was a recommendation.
That was a recommendation.
I do think I tailed off a little bit, but I did. Yes, it was a recommendation that it included that condition.
Are we happy to include that condition? It doesn't seem to affect the operation, so we're fine with that. So, with the amended drainage condition and the inclusion of a 6 p.m. curfew, got that okay? Right, all those in favour of the application? Another display of unanimity. What a lovely. Thank you very much indeed. That is approved. But it has to be referred to the Secretary of State, obviously, for formal approval. Okay, we'll move on to item 4D now, which is 67 Grantham Drive, York. Now, this application is for a not the right one, sorry, 4E, sorry. Yes, it is, yes, sorry, it is 40. I've just jumped over an application, sorry. A single-storey rear and side extension forming demolition of existing conservatory. Over to you, Gareth.
The chair has been slow today. There we go.
There we go.
So 67 Grantham Drive is a two-storey semi-detached house. It has been previously extended both into the roof and to the rear with this conservatory. The proposal, oh, got some photographs first. So there's the front elevation and the rear elevation. So that shows the existing conservatory. Of note, the neighbouring conservatory on the attached property. The Google Earth view showing the rear of the properties, turn frontage. Obviously, there's that house adjacent, angled towards the garden. So the proposal is for single-storey rear and side extension marked in red on that drawing there, following the demolition of the existing conservatory. It is a modest 2.5 metre extension to the rear. Maximum height to the eaves of 2.3, and then maximum height to the top of the lean-to roof of 3.6 metres. That's recommended for approval.
Thank you. There are no public speakers on this. So any questions from officers, from members towards officers? Nope. In that case, we'll move straight into debate. Councillor Crawshaw first, and I'll take you second.
Say it's a fairly bog standard application, so I'm going to move the officer's recommendation, Chair.
All right.
I was going to do the same, so I'm happy to second.
I think several of us were as well.
Sorry.
So it's been proposed and seconded. I'm happy to put it to the vote. I think it wouldn't have come to committee had it not been the applicant it is. So proposed and seconded approval. All those in favour, please show. Another unanimous one. Good heavens, this is a record. Fine. And now we'll move on to the last application, which is 17 Newlands Drive, York. It's an application for a property change of use from a dwelling house to 6 occupant house in multiple occupation. Over to you, Gareth. There we go.
Thank you, Chair. So 17 Newlands Drive is a bungalow with rooms in the roof. Planning application is a change of use from a dwelling to a 6 occupant house in multiple occupation. It has been amended during the course of during the progress of the application to reduce it. Originally, it came in as a 7-bedroom house in multiple occupation, so outside of the C4 use class. It's a detached property. Newlands Drive is a relatively narrow residential street running between Burbage Road and Beckfield Lane. It's image from the front, so this is the taken from Google Street View, so the property. This is the another view of the property. It's a rather blurred image of an extension that was constructed in after 2002 when the building was taken over by the Wilberforce Trust. And the Google Earth image, the site, the frontage of the site is already hard surfaced. There's a garage building which will be used for secure cycle parking. And you can see the existing the boundaries in place there. Existing internal layout. It shows its previous use. Previously, it was a house which was occupied by people in need of care because of visual and some of the physical disabilities managed by the Wilberforce Trust. Proposed internal layout shows a good standard of accommodation for a house in multiple occupation. The 6 bedrooms all have en suite bathrooms. Is a dining kitchen at the front, a living room towards the rear, and it's a gym, but it could be used for any particular purpose. So that building there is the rather blurred photograph I showed from the rear. Is that section of the house. So it's recommended for planning permission, subject to the conditions set out on page 87 and 88 of the report.
Thank you very much indeed. We have 4 speakers on this. Public parties. Yes, if you like.
Was it not considered an HMO when it was used by the Wilberforce Trust with 6 non-related residents? Yeah.
It's the C3 of the use class.
Sorry?
C3 of the use classes order has, I think, 3 constituent parts. One will be a sort of like a family occupied house, but it does allow for occupation by up to 6 residents living together as a single household in need of care.
Okay,
So
I did
that's
wonder
why-
if that was more or less the relevant qualification.
Yeah, so it was in effect, it was a shared house.
Yeah,
But it fell within C3 rather than C4 because of that care element and
Thank you.
management.
That I did wonder if that was the case. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, do you want to say these comments? It's all the plan's absolutely fine.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. So page 80, paragraph 3.2, the highways comments say that express concerns about the widening of an existing access, which would conflict with the streetworks policy. And I wasn't clear what access, is that just the front access that they were raising a concern around? Because it looked to be fairly wide as it was.
It would be the dropped curb, doesn't we wouldn't normally allow a curb to be dropped across the full width of the site.
And has that concern, I appreciate the other concern that they raised has been addressed, but has that concern, do you know whether that?
My understanding is there's no change to the frontage now.
Right, okay.
Right. That's the proposal in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In that case, we'll move on to public participants. We have 4. First one is Jane Barker, who is speaking in opposition. Okay, you have 3 minutes. I'll give you a quick reminder after with 30 seconds to go. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine. Thank you.
When you're outside.
Right, so I just wanted to start off because initially the developers were talking about similarities to this use and the previous use. There were multiple occupants before, but as been already mentioned, they were housebound. They had no vehicles and only a couple of staff members were on duty at any time. The staff often arrived to work on foot, bus, or occasionally by moped or car. There was no disruption to the street, no additional noise, and certainly no parking issues, which I think is in contrast to what we're now facing. In the committee report for this meeting, in paragraph 5.14, it states that number 17 Newlands Drive is a detached bungalow located within a residential cul-de-sac which runs off Beckfield Lane, which is obviously inaccurate because it's actually a through road. As a through road, it's regularly used to cut out the intersection between Boroughbridge Road and Beckfield Lane, and it can be very busy. Number 17 is located in the middle of this through road on a sharp bend with no additional roadside parking outside due to the number of driveways in close proximity, which can be seen on the photographs. Parking is clearly the main issue in this planning permission, if this planning permission were to be granted. This narrow through road cannot sustain parking on both sides and still provide safe passage for cars, emergency vehicles, amenity vehicles, and specialised transport, leading to serious danger to residents, especially for those with prams and wheelchairs, local pedestrians, dog walkers, and even wildlife, because we do have a family of foxes that live on the street. A minimum of 6 bedrooms with no stipulation that these bedrooms will be single occupancy means the number of cars will surely exceed the absolute maximum of 3 allocated parking spaces. However, for sheer ease, residents are more likely to park on the street or even use our precious green space opposite the development for fear of being blocked in. We saw that in one of the previous photos. One of the vans was actually parked on the green space. This has been proven by builders who park every day on the street and the green space, even if there is space available in the allocated parking area. Current residents close to the property have had their drives blocked by trades without checking whether it's okay, and it has resulted in people being late for work. There's clearly no consideration for the current residents, and so it does beg the question, if someone moves in on a short-term let, would they behave any differently? The overdevelopment of the street will impact on its profile. It's a quiet, safe residential area with properties designed for families and retired persons, leading to an increase in noise, huge parking issues, and ultimately a lack of safety for residents and users.
You have 30 seconds.
Thank you. I would request that this application is deferred so that the committee's decision can be based on accurate information, understanding that this development is located on a narrow, busy through road and not a cul-de-sac. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions for Ms. Barker? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming to speak to us this evening. Sorry you had to wait for a long time. I just wanted to understand a little bit. It looks from the picture that there's no restrictions in terms of there's no single double yellow lines or anything like that on the street.
No.
And it says in the report that already you can get vehicles parked sort of straddling the pavement. Can you currently park without straddling the pavement? Is it just that people tend to park that way, or
because the road's so narrow?
Yeah.
If you've got large vans or lorries coming down the road, they would have to go up onto the pavement to come past the car. So some people do park on the road against the curb. Some people park just on the curb. It's not ideal, especially when the bungalow was used for people who needed support because some of them were in wheelchairs. So we were very mindful of the fact that we needed to stay off. But parking is a major issue on the street. I mean, you can see from that looks like it's a massive drive in front of that bungalow. I can tell you it's not. At the moment, we have a permanent small truck that's parked on there, and there's a skip, which is fine. It's part of the builders. There is that small wall has already been removed that's next to the wheelie bin. And there is space there for another car or a van to park there each day, but they never do. They always park either on the grass or outside the houses, and any other transport comes in for work on the bungalow. They just park anywhere on the street.
Thank you. Any further questions from members?
No.
Nope.
All right. Thank you very much.
Contributions. We'll take your views into account.
Gareth? Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify? If that bit of wall's been removed, should that not have been part of the application? I'm just thinking, because that was the point I was just asking about.
can take it out.
They can take it out under permitted development rights, that level of demolition. So we would say that the plan submitted should cover every aspect of the development, but it is a minor thing. If we felt it was necessary to reinstate it, we could.
It was more just to understand from because I was asking about the highways issue that had been raised, and I'd sort of assumed it wasn't going to be proposed, but if they've actually gone ahead and done it, whether or not. But yeah.
Councillor Derby.
Can I just ask about the width across the? Can I ask about the width across the front of the drive, the front of the plot, since that wall has now been taken out? Just how wide is it?
The width, I'm sorry, I don't have that detail in front of me. Well, it's wide enough for a transit van, I guess.
Any other questions? Nope. Right. We'll probably solve public speaker. I thought, yes, you sort of, yeah, but don't worry about it. When the speakers finish, we'll move on. We'll take your question if that's okay. We'll get the public speakers because then no, it's Councillor Crawshaw causing trouble as usual. Don't worry. But we'll move on to the third speaker, which is Councillor Lomas, who's speaking as ward councillor. Oh, sorry, I apologise. I do apologise. Sorry, I apologise. Terribly sorry. Mr. Finn, Mark Finn, who is speaking, asking us to reconsider the recommendation to approve. Sorry. Second in from the left. That's it, you're on.
Great, thanks very much.
Right, welcome to the commission. You've got 3 minutes and I'll give you a shout with 30 seconds to go if you need.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I'm going to reiterate a lot of what my colleague Jane has said, but I think it's relevant. Our opposition to the application rests principally on the likely effects from increased levels of parking in the street. Residents have already seen an increase in vehicular traffic and have collated numerous photographs over the past few weeks of vehicles which have blocked their driveways, parked on grass verges and reduced available space. The arrival of a minimum of 6 additional unrelated HMO residents, each room potentially with at least 1 vehicle, increases the potential for parking congestion even further. Don't take my word for it, take the word and the analysis of Emma Leonard, CYC's development control engineer, who wrote to the developers in November, characterising the property as being unable to accommodate more than 3 vehicles on its frontage and on a road which, and I quote, is subject to physical constraints, unquote. Ms. Leonard noted that the property is likely, quote, to attract residents requiring a car, unquote, and that the road is constructed with a pronounced bend and, quote, would not readily accommodate overspill parking generated by the proposed and existing residents and additional visitors associated with the development, unquote. Subsequently, as detailed in your papers, Ms. Leonard's objection appears to have been resolved, although I cannot confirm that fact because I haven't seen the document that resolves this issue. I have seen the original letter and I've got that for you if you'd like to see it, but I haven't seen the resolution. Councillors will also wish to note, as my colleague James said, a key fact in the committee's papers on the issue is materially incorrect. Paragraph 5.14 lists Newlands Drive as being a cul-de-sac. In fact, it's a through road, as you now know. We believe additional parking combined with through traffic increases substantially the impact on our residents, and we therefore ask that the proposal be rejected or deferred. We submit that an appropriate planning balance has not been properly considered and that the material facts in the committee's papers are incorrect and do not take into account Ms. Leonard's original analysis, which I can show to you if you need to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Finn, please? Nope. In that case, I'll thank you for your contributions and we'll take your views into account. And this time we have got Councillor Katie Lomas as ward councillor. I think you know the routine, so.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, I'm speaking on behalf of residents of Newlands Drive, having met with pretty much all of the residents of the street over recent weeks. Firstly, I want to say it is a real shame to see the loss of a community-based facility for people who need care in a very home-like environment. In fact, there were 2 such facilities in the local area. Both have been lost. And we now have no similar facilities in the area around Acombe Ward. The previous use was much more akin to a single household. Typically, there would be 4 residents, not 6. They required care, they did not drive. The only traffic would be a carer coming to work who could park easily on the frontage. Now the plan is for 6 unrelated, unconnected tenants minimum. They will need to park, and this is a huge issue. The frontage is wedge shaped, which you can see on the diagrams perhaps better than the photographs. I think you will struggle to get more than 2 unrelated vehicles parking on the front, because if you live in a household, you have access to each other's keys. You know what time each other is going out in the morning, you can park in the right order. But if you are unconnected residents in an HMO, you will not be able to rely on that, and people will not park in a way that blocks another in. This street is very narrow and it's got a really tight bend, which this property is on the corner of. It already suffers because it's used as a shortcut between the increasingly congested Burbridge Road and Beckfield Lane. That puts massive pressure on the street. And as has already been mentioned, there are issues with parking over the pavements because the road is not wide enough for 2 reasonably sized vehicles to pass at certain points. So people will park their larger vehicles straddling the pavement. There is no verge on one side of the road, or on the wide verge that serves as green space for residents on the other side of the road to this development. There are also concerns about noise issues. This is a quiet residential street, and it will now have significantly more households because each of the rooms in an HMO is a separate household. And that means more noise, more movements to and from work, and a different pattern of use. We should not ignore the very valid points made in some of the earlier reports about the use and the highways. We do need more good quality housing in Acombe, but we need
Right, I'm going to ask you to wind up fairly soon.
good quality, decent housing that adds to our communities. And we do have other developments nearby where they have purpose-built studio and 1-bedroom flats which provide for what is needed in the area. And the final point I want to make is that residents strongly suspect that despite the change to the plans made recently, the original 7 or 8 bedrooms will in fact be in use, because those 2 rooms in that blurry extension at the back have already been instated with plumbing for ensuite bathrooms, as the original plans suggested they would be.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think you have had 3 minutes, 45 seconds. So
just one last thing. Acombe is a suburban area. It is not in easy reach of the city centre. People who live in Acombe need to use a car to get to places of work and other services nearby. You will have 6 vehicles if you have a 6-bedroom HMO, not 3.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your contributions. We'll take your views into account. Due to 4 minutes, I will allow the applicant the next speaker a little bit longer as well, just out of fairness. Next speaker is Claire Richards, who's speaking in support. You are the applicant, I understand, right? So I'll be, since the agent, sorry, I'll allow you a little bit longer in the view that Councillor Lomas also got a little bit extra time. Thank you. Just press the button second from the left.
Thank you.
That's it.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The property was, prior to being sold, previously used by the Wilberforce Trust as a care facility
in which it had the opportunity to be inhabited by 6 individuals as opposed to being occupied by family units. The Wilberforce Trust provided supported housing and supported living for individuals with sensory or visual impairment in shared houses. The occupiers were provided with 24/7 care if required, and as such, there were frequent visits from care workers at various times throughout the day, along with friends and family. We have worked with the Highways Officer and the Planning Officer during the application process to secure the recommendation for approval before you today. The proposal is in full compliance of the Council's policy for HMOs set out within the Officer report. In this respect, it is noted that consideration has been given to the overall impact on neighbouring residential amenity and has been found to be acceptable. We can provide appropriate space for waste and recycling, it won't be in view of the street scene. There's a clear path laid out which will provide access to the front so that people can put the bins out. And we've provided a parking plan which demonstrates that 4 spaces can be provided on that front driveway. And we're providing tracking to show that they can be accessed independently, and the Highways Officer has raised no objections to that plan submitted. The width of the frontage, I think one of the councils asked how wide it was. At the widest point towards the back to the front where the windows are, it's over 9 metres. It is set within a substantial plot, and the rooms meet the required standards, with occupants having access to 2 living rooms, a gym space and a kitchen diner. The HMO will provide high quality accommodation and will be marketed to professionals only. My client currently manages another HMO in York on this basis and has received no complaints from neighbouring properties to the council to date. The insurance provider utilised by my client prevents students from occupying the building, and it is on this basis it will be advertised. The property will be closely managed by a property manager employed by the client, and we welcome the management condition proposed by the case officer. HMOs in the area are very low, and the site selection meets the criteria laid out in council's SPD. The site has great access to public transport, with the nearest bus stop 150 metres from the property, with frequent services connecting the development to the city centre and the railway station. The nearest shop is located 0.3 miles, and there is an e-scooter dock located close to the bus stop. I have already mentioned parking. We only need 3 spaces. We've shown 4. It's over and above your HMO guidance. Historical images of the site from Google Earth taken show 4 spaces comfortably parked in the driveway whilst owned by the Wilberforce Trust, and that goes back across a number of years. The parking provision is in excess of the requirements of the SPD. There are no highways objections to the proposal or any other technical consultees, nor the parish. It is considered there's ample space within the property for 6 residents to live comfortably, with a number of living spaces provided. Each room will have an ensuite. And note the planning officer's comments in this respect, who acknowledges the adequate space.
I'll ask you to be winding up now.
Yeah. I know there was a comment about if he increases the number over the 6, there's obviously measures in place. We can't go over 6 without another planning permission. And we hope that we demonstrate that our client is dedicated to providing a positive development in line with your SPD. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have members any questions for Ms. Richards? Councillor Crawshaw, then Councillor Galvin.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming to speak to us this evening. You mentioned that you've got tracking to demonstrate you could easily get 3 cars on the front and 4.
Yeah.
Can you just describe how, because we haven't obviously seen that, so I'm just trying to picture how that would work.
3 can go right at the back of the drive, right in front of where the windows are. There's no front door there. The front door is down the side, so it wouldn't block that access. And then 1 would go in front of that wall, which no longer exists. And the tracking demonstrates that they can come out independently without asking someone to move.
So the car that would be in the sort of back right corner can get clear of a car that's parked at the front right corner.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask on the crossing thing, we don't need to extend the crossing point.
Okay, thank you. Next question was from Councillor Galvin.
You mentioned.
Yeah.
Microphone,
Are you saying?
microphone, get John, please. Sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Are you saying it's not aimed at students?
It's not the client's intention to have students in
I
there,
mean,
it's professionals. I get that you cannot control that from a planning perspective.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, but that is not.
I mean,
his
the
intention.
distance actually is, it would not be necessarily attractive to students anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Ms Richards? Councillor, you indicated earlier you want to ask a question. Did you? That's of officers, no problem. Okay, thank you very much indeed for your contribution. We'll take these into account and we'll now move on to questions for officers. Councillor. Orwell.
Thank you, Chair. A few people have mentioned how narrow the road is. Do you know how narrow it is?
No, I don't. No, I don't. It appears, so
It said 2 cars.
Yeah.
it appears,
I mean, one of the comments was that 2 cars couldn't pass without, 2 reasonable sized vehicles couldn't pass without going on the curb.
I'm not sure that. No,
No, I'm afraid not now. No, sorry.
No, it's just to help you.
No, I think we can sort it out.
so you can see the width of a car, that's part on the.
It's
Yeah.
Part on. So yes, this is probably, it's less than 6.
about 5.5 metres, standard 5.5 metre carriageway.
You said it's when you get a car parked on, all the way on the road. And you get a bigger vehicle to come through.
Because those are parked on the
Has to go onto the curb.
Yeah.
Were it just 2 cars, a car parked and car passing, it was wide enough.
But if it is a standard
That's fine.
5.5, then that shouldn't be the case.
Yes.
Because in terms of the usual width of a vehicle is, certainly a car is rarely wider than 2 meters. But the point has been made.
Right, any other questions?
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned about the report suggesting that this is a cul-de-sac and then actually it being a through road and it being on the corner here. And I know that in previous applications, one of the big issues that highways have had has been around being able to get back onto the road in a forwards gear. And there's an issue around, and I'm looking at that and I'm sort of thinking, I can see how 4 cars can fit on the front there, but I can't see how 4 cars won't be having to reverse onto a corner of a very narrow road, potentially with vehicles on the wrong side of the road if they're coming around the parked cars that are there. And I'm just wondering, are we confident that highways have been clear that it's a through road with potentially, you know, because there's a big difference between being on the corner of a through road versus at the end of a cul-de-sac.
I was fully aware that that's an error in drafting by the planning case officer.
And I accept
It's
that those
clearly
mistakes will have looked at this. They will have looked at this in the full knowledge that it's a through road and not that,
Yes.
you know, that there's an error that has
I'm
sort of passed through
confident-
the system, if you see what I mean.
I'm confident that the highways officers are fully aware of what the traffic conditions on this road and how it is a through.
And so
Through road.
with that in mind, they felt that it wasn't possible to have 4 cars on the front of this because that's what the report says, that we couldn't require the 4 that would be required were it a 7-bed occupation. But we can, so the maximum that we can require is 3 as a 6-bed. But I'm just concerned still about this coming out of that drive in reverse on a corner on a relatively busy road there. And
Well, there is on a street like this, I would say there's no requirement that we have on-site turning, and I doubt whether on-site turning exists in any of the other houses on the street. The issue about the number of parking spaces, you recall from other HMOs that we've dealt with, this issue about being able to ensure that each space can operate independently. So that gives a bigger parking space than you might normally expect. This 6 metre by 3.2, and it's all about not blocking access to the back, but also not relying on being able to get someone else to move their car, which you might be able to if it was a single family dwelling. The original drawing showed 4 and showed tracking for 4, but it wasn't felt to be reasonable given the HMO use of the property. And so the applicant reduced the numbers to 6, which then, because of our parking guidelines, has that requirement for 1 parking space per 2 HMO bedrooms. But nothing else to say to that.
Sorry, Councillor Lomas, I'm afraid you can't contribute at this point. Sorry, Councillor Lomas, I'm really sorry, but you had your chance to have your say, and I'm afraid I can't allow you to speak any further from the public gallery. It'd be unfair on the applicant. Any of nope, nobody can. Nobody can. We've had the public participation. Are there any other questions for officers? So I have one. A lot of the objections seem to be on highway grounds. So were we to refuse it on highway grounds, given that highways have not registered any objections, would that be an area that we could defend on appeal?
I think what an inspector would look at is whether it created a severe highway, like a movement of vehicles issue, or a significant issue in terms of highway safety. So they would assess whether reversing vehicles were likely to prejudice conditions of highway safety. And they would look, in terms of numbers, they would look at what our guidelines say. Now, it complies with our guidelines. Those guidelines are quite old, but they're all we have. So if you were to suggest that because of the location of this property, that actually it should provide more car parking spaces and they can't be adequately accommodated within the property, then you'd have to demonstrate why that was the case, and what evidence you had to say that our guidelines aren't appropriate in this particular situation.
Thank you for that. Any further questions to Gareth? Councillor Craghill.
Yeah, the applicant said that the property is within 150 metres of a bus stop, and there is e-scooter parking there as well. And the shops are less than about a third of a mile distant. Are those? I don't think that's in the report, is it? Anyway, is that accurate in your view, Gareth?
I think it is.
On? Oh, right, I've missed it. I think.
We certainly talk about the bus.
What?
Still running.
Oh, choosing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Nope. In that case, we'll move into debate. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I think on this one, you can see from the photograph the problem that we're going to create. I think in general, actually, this meets the thresholds in terms of there are no other HMOs in the area, and we need HMOs as part of the housing mix and all of those sorts of things. But you can see on that photograph that there are cars already parking in the street. I think cars that are forced to park on the pavement is a major issue. It's a major issue in my ward, where people with any sort of mobility problem, or if you've got buggies and that sort of thing, you know, it's already creates a problem from that point of view. But also what it does is it pushes cars over onto travelling potentially on the wrong side of the road. If you have, which I think is inevitable, 5 or 6 cars associated with this property, we know that you're going to be guaranteeing a couple of extra cars on what is already a fairly busy street scene there. And I think that with the location of the property on the corner, with the frequency of vehicles that will be having to reverse out and potentially reversing out around other cars parked on the street that are associated with that property, my hunch from that photograph would be that 1 or 2 of those cars that are already parked there are probably second cars associated with the other dwellings. And if you look at all of those other dwellings, some of them have got space for a couple of cars on the front, but there's some of them that have clearly only got space for 1 on the front. I think we're going to create a quite significant parking problem or road safety problem there. Now, you might address that via double yellow lines or single yellow lines or that sort of thing, but I don't think that we could approve this without any of those other mitigations in place in terms of the safety of the street at that location. So I think it is a special circumstance, actually, specifically because of the location and the pre-existing parking issues, given the narrowness of the highway at that location. So I think on that basis, we would have a strong case to defend. And whilst I recognise you have to go in the order of testing approval, I won't be supporting approval on this one.
Councillor Galvin.
Chairman, this is a difficult one for me. And I think this is probably perhaps one of the most pretty important ones that we've had tonight. There is a serious demand for this kind of property. It isn't, we can't guarantee it, of course, but it's highly unlikely it could be students. And I can tell you that for single young men and young ladies, or young ladies and young men, whichever way you want to put it, there is a great demand for this because of the situation of the housing problem that we've got in the country. And I'm not trying to make any political point. I happen to think that we've got a very, very serious issue with housing for a whole number of reasons. And it's going to have to be addressed one way or t'other. And I'm not sure that any government will address it in a proper and solid fashion, not the way I would address it anyway. We need this kind of accommodation. And I'm pretty certain that where we, and I appreciate everything that everybody said. I live in what is in essence a cul-de-sac with vehicles parked on both sides of the road with ruddy great vans. And it does cause problems. We also have agricultural machinery like combine harvesters and great big ploughs coming up and down, and it does cause problems. So I know fully about this kind of situation. When I lived there were 3 or 4 on the road, and now it's like the multi-story car park at one level, if there is such a thing. I struggle with it, but we need this kind of accommodation, and it's no good us all crying into our beer saying there's nowhere for young single people to live. You know, we have to make provision for them and help people to get a roof over their head. So it's with a heavy heart I'm going to move, Chair, that permission be granted, because I think, in all honesty, it would also be turned over by the inspector. I'm quite certain of that the inspector would say you've no grounds to turn it down, because one of the things that we can't do, we can't look into a crystal ball and see what the future is. We can make assumptions, but we can't prove that point, come to an appeal. So I'm, with a heavy heart, quite happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Members, any member willing to second that?
Yeah.
Councillor.
Can I just make a point?
Yes, of course you can, yeah.
So I was a bit dubious about reciting things from memory. So the MPPF on paragraph 111 talks about determining planning applications, and it says development should only be prevented or refused on highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network will be severe. I just wanted to make sure that in what I'd said before was in the right order in terms of the severe and the significant impact.
Thank you. I personally, I'm not entirely happy with this, but I do not think we can conceivably defend an appeal on highways grounds. It's simple as that. There are obviously highways issues on this road. It's narrow, but I don't feel that this site, this particular property, is causing those problems. They're there already. And the other thing about it is also on the outside of the curve, and that gives much better sight lines in terms of getting out of there if they have to reverse out. As far as the HMO is concerned, the HMO levels in this area are minuscule, so there's no possible objection on the Article 4 directive in terms of, HMO levels. I just don't see how we can possibly refuse it on highways grounds, so I shall very reluctantly vote for approval. Councillor Crawshaw.
Chair, I did second and I was going to speak.
Sorry, I didn't realise you were going to speak. I do apologise. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat all you've said because and all Councillor Galvin said, but for me, it depends on the width of the road. That's why I asked the question about how wide it is. And it is a road wide enough for 2 cars to pass. We have passed HMOs in the past with narrower roads than that, which have caused issue because of that. Particular one in Huntington, I remember, where you can't get 2 cars past on that road, and it was agreed for an HMO there. We can't, there aren't planning reasons to refuse it. There will be issues for neighbours, but there could easily be issues for anybody using that house, even if it's a family house. And we have this all the time. So yes, I'm happy to second you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for cutting you off. I thought you'd just said you were going to approve it as a second approval. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to just pick up on and completely agree with the point that Councillor Galvin made about the need for this type of accommodation. And I think, I just want to be really clear that, from that perspective, it is what it is, and I totally agree. But I think that actually the policy that Gareth read out there is really clear, isn't it? It's that, does it create a significant problem? Is it part of a cumulative impact? And we can see from the photograph that's in front of us that there is already a problem in terms of narrowness of the street and cars parking on the street. So an HMO with 6 potential independent households is not the same as a large family home. Even if you said a family with 2 or 3 cars, or maybe even 4 cars, you're not going to get, well, how many? I mean, there's one household in the whole of York that has 4 cars on a single res park. That's paid for the highest tier of things. There's 1 in the whole of York. So it's not usual for a household to have 4 cars associated with it unless it's an HMO. It really isn't. And so I think we can be quite clear that the cumulative impact of granting permission for that will have a significant impact on the parking in the street and the associated highway safety with it. So I disagree that it would be something that wouldn't be defendable. Obviously, we all have to come up with the right balance. And like I say, I do totally agree with you, Councillor Galvin, that we do need this type of property, but the location in this specific case is such that I think it will create a significant highways problem.
You make me feel very guilty because until recently, my 2-person household had 5 cars on the drive. So sorry. Moving on.
Chair, the applicant would be able to look back at all the permissions we've given and find similar applications even with even poorer road conditions that we've agreed.
The key point here is that we have a policy that an HMO of 6 bedrooms, six individuals has 3 car parking spaces. That policy is laid down and this can provide that. So I can't see how we can refuse it and say it's exacerbating the road problems. I just don't see it, but anyway.
But my point would be that the MPPF policy, which supersedes the local plan policy, if we were minded, I think that we can make a strong enough case that it is in conflict with that policy. But anyway, we've all made our points, haven't we? So
Any other councillors like to comment before we move to the vote? In that case, we'll put this to the vote. It has been proposed by councillor Galvin and seconded by councillor Orrell that this application be approved. All those in favour, please show. Those against? Unanimity is broke down, but that is actually approved. There are no further items for urgent business, so therefore I will call the meeting to a halt and thank you all for your